security should be baked in from day one. I have been into so many organizations where security was an afterthought or security was baked in later because the developers and engineers were just so quick to hurry up and get the product to market. Without the security piece, you're layering it on top later on, then one, it's going to cost you more money. Now you have to change all of this code. You have to implement all of these different processes. If you were to start it from the beginning, your code would be written securely and you wouldn't have a problem.
To succeed and thrive at C-suite level, you need strategic clarity and operational excellence. Hello there, it's time again for the C-Suite Framework podcast. How are you doing? If you are listening to this in real time, it is late December, early January. I hope that you've managed to maybe get a little bit of downtime over the holidays. This is a favorite time of the year for me where maybe somewhat a little bit away from the hustle and craziness, you grab a notebook, go sit somewhere quiet and try and get a little bit intentional about the year ahead and goals, hopes, aspirations, maybe old habits you want to shed, new things that you want to take on board, a time to really get your head straight and look forward to the year ahead. And to maybe help inspire you and to stimulate the brain cells after eating all of that Christmas turkey, I have a brilliant guest on the podcast today. His name is Cordell Robinson. He has deep technical expertise, former military, software engineering, cybersecurity, data privacy. I suspect there's lots of things that he's seen and done that he doesn't share, but what he is very much willing to share are his thoughts on how clients should approach cybersecurity, data privacy, AI, and so on. And he's got strong views, and he doesn't hold back on them. And in particular, we brought it back several times to security and cyber for non-technical people and how we non-techies can still be highly engaged, highly thoughtful, and highly useful in these discussions as we look at our organizations and what they're doing with data and technology. A reminder to check out my courses and books and podcasts and all sorts of other good things on my website at www.csuiteframework.com. And you can find all the details there. And I really hope that 2026 is a fantastic and fruitful year for you. And to get the brain cells going, let's cross over to Cordell. I am delighted to be joined on the C-Suite Framework podcast today by Cordell Robinson. Cordell is founder and CEO of Brownstone Consulting, an organization which provides project management, compliance, organizational development, and full-scope security assessments to their clients. Cordell holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Electrical Engineering from Pepperdine University and is a Juris Doctor of Law from Georgetown University. He is also a former Senior Navy Intelligence Analyst and is certified in CISO, CRISC, and CAP. Cordell, delighted to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Cordell, you have such an interesting career, academic background and career. For the benefit of our listeners, just walk us through that career trajectory and some of the major pivots that you took along the way.
Sure, definitely. So when I started university, I went for electrical engineering and computer science because, I have a, strong technical mindset. So I thought, maybe being as, a software engineer or architect or something like that would be in the engineering world would be wonderful. And I really enjoyed math and sciences. I thought it was always fun. But from there, when I graduated university, I decided to join the United States Navy because one, I wanted to serve my country. And two, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do career-wise. So I joined, ended up in the intelligence field, which was really, really fun. I served in Diego Garcia, which is in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and in Rota, Spain. So both really great duty stations, very different duty stations, but really great. And did different work in each. Some of it cross-pollinated, but a lot of it was a lot different. From there, when I left the Navy, I did almost 5 years. When I left the Navy, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So I did get a job as a software engineer for a contracting company, working as a contractor for a Department of the Army, which was cool, but I didn't really want to be a software engineer. I, started doing the work and it was like, I don't really want to read code all day. I don't really want to deal with like software like all the time. I want to do something else. So I enrolled into law school. And once I got my law degree, I basically married legal with, they call it now cyber, was information security. So I married the two together and really based and built my career around that. So I built out kind of a niche area. And this was before privacy was a big thing. I mean, yeah, we have the Privacy Act of 1974, but law and privacy wasn't like really strong. This was back in the early 2000s. So, and then it came about closer to like 2010 timeframe, like 2008, 2010 timeframe was when a lot of attorneys started to go into the privacy realm of the cyber portion. But what I was doing was not just privacy. I was doing the entire compliance umbrella because I thought the entire compliance umbrella was a lot more exciting because compliance covers all of cyber, the technical, the non-technical, the legislation, privacy, all those things. So I built out that niche career. I worked for several different contracting companies, ended up working at Hewlett-Packard for a few years, which was a great opportunity working for a big corporation. I learned quite a bit there. And then when I left there, I decided to start my own firm because I wanted to do things my way and kind of build out a company and a career that I think that would best fit a lot of clients' needs because having a smaller, more boutique company really, I think, would serve well to a lot of organizations.
It's a fascinating series of steps, and it feels as if you took each step at its time. You figured out what you needed next and went and did that and then moved forward. How did you find, can I ask, the pivot between obviously a military career and a military context and then moving into the private sector and then moving into, a big organization with a lot of scaffolding, I guess, and rules and regulations to kind of doing your own thing? Like those are some major, major pivots in different contexts, aren't they?
Yeah, major pivots. But I've always took really big chances because I'm a visionary. And so I always have big and bold visions. I remember when I was in the military, one of my senior officers said, you have lofty goals, because I would talk about different things that I wanted to do. They said, you have lofty goals. And I'm like, no, I just have bold vision. And when I set my mind to do something, I go ahead and take the leap and go for it. And I just feel like if you have the grit and you put in the hard work, you can achieve it.
Yeah, well, including becoming a lawyer with Georgetown University. The military career, and any fun anecdotes that you're authorized to share with us? Anything good you can tell us from those years?
Sure. So Diego Garcia kind of is a tiny little island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Not many people knew about it back then. I think now more people know about it. And so what was interesting was, and I don't know how it is now, but mail took 30 days. So if you sent mail out back to the United States, it took 30 days to get there. And if you sent, you got mail from back home, United States, it took 30 days to get there. And so that was like quite a long time. And then phone calls were $2.50 a minute. So people barely called home because it was like very expensive. And so those were adjustments because we were so used to, things just in a few days. And back then phone calls did cost because we didn't have cell phones, smartphones, or anything like that. Cell phones were out, but they weren't like now where everybody has one. And then, of course, smartphones did not exist. This was the late 90s, so smartphones didn't exist at all. And so it was very different and you had to get used to a lot of things and you had to learn a lot of patience. There was limited resources on the island as for like the different types of food supply and things like that. So you had to make do. What was really funny was I bought this little electric pot. And I would literally cook in my barracks room, and I would just cook myself meals because I didn't like the meals in the mess hall, like at all. Like I just was like, that's not for me. So I would use this little electric pot and just create all kinds of like interesting, crazy things, being very creative. So that was like really fun to do.
Wow, amazing. So let's take it right up to the present now. And so you've been running your own organization for many years now. What are the services that Brownstone Consulting most often gets asked for by its clients?
We most often get asked for compliance services to include like NIST compliance, ISO compliance, GDPR compliance, PCI compliance, and AI governance, most recently in the past couple years. And so we focus on those. And also, of course, penetration testing and vulnerability scanning is rolled into that. And within those services, we do one of two things or sometimes both. Sometimes we split the team in half. So we'll either write all the documentation for an organization by interviewing everyone and getting all the proper information and then guiding them to make sure that their security posture is strong, or we go in and we are basically like pre-auditors or assessors. We assess their organization and provide them assessment services to let them know what their security posture is and what they need to do to fix it. And sometimes we do both, where we split the team in half. And so the team, we have certain rules and guidelines where the team, they cannot communicate with each other on anything as they're doing the job, so that there's no data leakage and the information stays pure. And so one half of the team does the compliance side and writes the documents, and then the other side does all of the testing. And then we send the testing to someone that has nothing to do with the project, so that everything remains in line and everything remains, status quo.
So the use case is, I want to become ISO certified. I want to become NIST. I want to demonstrate. Is it usually because a client is asking for it, or because the organization just feels it needs to attain that level of maturity? What's the why behind the ask?
It's both. It's mostly because they have to do it. So most organizations, they get audited by different auditing firms, or their governments audit them, or their governments have requirements. So, for example, in the UK, GDPR is a requirement for a lot of companies. So they have no choice but to go through the process to, get GDPR certified. In the United States, it's NIST. That's usually NIST 853, or really FISMA. FISMA is the umbrella of NIST. And so there's all of NIST publications and documents, special publications and documents. So the government itself, there's a requirement. They have no choice. So all of their systems, organizations have to go through that process. And now a lot of companies, if you want to do business with the government, you have no choice but to go through the FISMA process. And also, if you want to basically show that you have a strong security posture, so that you can do business with other companies and they know that you're actually securing their data. If they want to work for you, they're going to spend a lot of money with you. They want to see that you've gone through the process and you understand, and also know that your data is being handled properly. And I think this is a bigger thing, is more than just the process, because the process is just part of it, but it is the trust factor in, okay, do I trust that this company and its personnel are going to be able to handle our information and our data in a manner that we won't have breaches and leakage and so many other crazy things that can happen.
It sounds like, does it often start as a compliance exercise, right? I want the piece of paper that says I'm certified in this, but actually potentially become something more thoughtful?
It does. So they go in. So everybody thinks, or not everybody, but so many companies think, everything's fine. We haven't had a breach. We've been, working and doing these operations for all these years. So, we're going to go and, basically they call it a check in the box. We're going to get this paperwork done. It's a check in the box. And then once they get into it, and then we present the findings, and also especially when we present not just the technical findings of the vulnerabilities they have or the penetration tests on, like, okay, there's bad actors actually sitting on your network. But beyond that, okay, your personnel aren't trained properly because we just did a phishing exercise and this percentage of people clicked on this attachment in the email, or we did a social engineering exercise and this many people gave us all of this data that they shouldn't have given us from just having a conversation. And so it opens eyes a lot more, and a lot more attention is paid to when it comes to their cybersecurity, getting our cybersecurity house in order.
Do you feel as if a project isn't complete unless you have that kind of breakthrough with the client? So, I mean, I guess, if the exercise was a check in a box, it sounds like you feel more satisfied if actually you've brought about a change in culture, maybe, and ethos.
Oh, definitely. I always like to walk away with making sure that the organization has had a lessons learned, and that it's in a positive manner, because I let them know your findings is not a negative toward you. Your findings mean so many different things. One, it means that now you can go to your C-level or your upper management and request more budget to fix these things, because now you have proof. The other thing is that now you know where your personnel are, like what they don't know and what they do know. And so now you know that you need to implement more training and the different types of training that you need to implement, because the employees are the weakest link to the entire thing.
Yeah, I reviewed a book last year by Stephen Delahunty, and the name has temporarily escaped me. I'll put it in the notes. their view was that 10% of your employees will ultimately at some point click on the wrong thing or do something or fall prey to phishing. And that as a result, you have to plan for a breach as something that is going to happen at some point. So yes, you prevent as much as you can, but actually you also need the protocols for, let's say, a ransomware attack or something like that as well.
Exactly. And so if they don't know, for example, what technologies that they need to have in place, then when the breach does happen, then now they're scrambling. And then it's going to cost more money because everything last minute, of course, costs more money because it's like, okay, we need this now. We need to fix this now. Or even if they have to replace an entire network, like the United States, there were some places that had to replace their entire networks because they had bad actors sitting on their network for a very long time. So I'm like, now you have to spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you would have done your due diligence and had that, compliance check by a third party, because I always say a lot of companies say, well, we do this internally, so we're fine. Well, when you do it internally, it's biased because a lot of the employees, they don't want to tell their upper management that something is really wrong. So they kind of soften the blow. They may tell them what's going on, but they soften it where it doesn't sound as serious. But when a third party comes in, it's not sugar-coated at all. This is the fact, this is what's going on. And then here are the measures that you need to take to fix it. And you don't have to fix everything all at once because it could be very expensive according to their budget, but at least get on a path and create a plan. We call it a plan of action to start to get those things remediated.
Does your military training play into when you do some of that simulation, some of those exercises with senior management?
It really does. My military training helped me be very methodical. It helped me be very structured and helped me be extremely finite when it's about things. So one, I've never been intimidated. Even when I was really young now, of course, I'm a C-level person, but when I was really young, I was never intimidated to speak with senior management or C-suite people. I've always been open to briefing them and telling them the truth of what's going on. And I've always been very confident because I did the research and I worked toward understanding the details of everything that needed to be known and also making sure that I work with my team around me. And I always also had an open mind of learning. When you have an open mind of learning, that really helps as well, because if you don't know, you don't know, but at least be open to learning so that you could be better.
This podcast is brought to you by the best-selling How to Be A range of books. These books, authored by me, Jennifer Geary, in collaboration with other seasoned experts, break down roles such as the COO, Chief Risk Officer, Chief People Officer, and Chief Sustainability Officer into their component parts. They explain the technical capabilities you need, but also how to operate at this level, preparing yourself, getting to know your peers, engaging with culture, strategy, building your team, and much more. Over 30,000 books have been sold, and the books have received overwhelmingly positive reviews. There's even a book about the role of AI called The Augmented COO. Check out the books, available on Amazon and Waterstones now. I found when I worked in Save the Children, we obviously had a very powerful crisis management protocol because they were on the humanitarian front line, there were lives at risk. And what I loved about that planning, which I still take forward now, is it wasn't especially detailed. Like, we didn't map scenarios to the nth detail because it was so varied in so many different contexts. But what we did have was a very rapid way to get the right people together, to establish who was in charge. So, for example, if the CEO was involved, because he traveled a lot, was involved in the conflict, where the chain of command went, who was next and so on, and how to work problems in a really high pressure situation. I'd love your perspective on that as well, though. It's like the quote by Eisenhower, I think, that, a lot of plans are useless, but the act of planning is very useful indeed. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. So in the cyber war, we call that contingency and incident. So contingency planning and incident response planning. So you have a contingency plan. So it's basically, what's the chain of command? Who is contacted? When are they contacted? How are they contacted? And then you have the incident responses. If there's an incident, and you have different incident scenarios, and it's not really just the plan itself, it's actually executing it. And so we always say, have you actually performed an exercise, an actual test, a real live exercise or an actual test exercise, but made the test exercise as live as it can be? Because when you do that and you it's just like anything. When you practice something and you do it over and over, you get better and better at it, and then it becomes seamless. So when you have a real protocols that you have to deal with, it's like second nature. You're able to do it. And so I always really press toward that, especially a part of our compliance services that we provide. One of the main things that comes out of it, I'm like, well, if you don't want to spend a lot of budget on all of these other different things that you need to, at least spend the budget on your contingency and your incident, because one, all your people are involved in the organization. So everybody's going to be knowledgeable and know what they need to do. And then two, you'll know how to react. And then there's no major panic because you practice on how to react.
You're obviously based in the US, Cordell. I'm here in London, but I think you do quite a bit of international work. What differences do you perceive, particularly at the moment, between the US and Europe?
So I would say Europe, it has more stricter regulations than the US right now, which I think is great. I really love the European restrictions. I know that the United States is working on increasing their restrictions in the near future, which is great. But I really like working with European companies, especially, the different EU acts and things that are out there. And it really helps me doing work here in the United States with different companies, because with that experience working with the European companies, it helps my company be stronger and also provide better services. And then working with the European companies, it really gives a different flavor on not just the work itself, but how business is done, because business is not done the same on the different continents at all.
No, it really isn't, is it? And it's interesting that you say you like and you encourage and you like working with restrictions. That was your word. I mean, obviously there is a higher bar at the moment in Europe when you look at the EU AI Act, GDPR, which has kind of become the global standard and that kind of thing. But a lot of European regulation is also outcomes based rather than checkbox, which I think maybe some US organizations struggle with as a concept.
That is so true. And that is one of the things that I am working with companies here in the US is looking more towards outcome based instead of a check in a box, because the outcome is what matters. The outcome will affect your bottom line, not the check in a box. And so I say, look at what the outcome is going to be so that you can work on bettering that outcome, and it's going to make your lives better. I mean, it's growing pains at first, of course, because people don't like the change, but I also come to them because a lot of security professionals have in the past and still now, because I've ran into it where, at least here in the United States, where it's very combative, where they're like, no to everything and you can't do this and you can't do that. And I like to be collaborative. I'm like, let's work together to get you to where you need to be, instead of me telling you, well, you can't do any of these things. You can still do things. You just have to collaborate properly with your third-party security organization and make sure that you work together to get things to the point where you're going to be compliant, to the point where your systems are secure, to the point where your people are properly trained.
And something, I espouse all the time as well is that when you bring your risk and compliance professionals into early design stages, into like analyzing the problem from the get-go, and you can actually build in security by design from the beginning, it can be so much more seamless and so much higher quality. When I was in Asto, we inbuilt security right into the customer journey, and it was a 9-minute end-to-end journey with a financial decision at the end. But you just didn't even know it was security. It was just happening naturally as part of the customer journey, and that's what I always aspire to.
Yes, I love that concept, and we do that here in the software development lifecycle, the SDLC, where security should be baked in from day one at the beginning of the process, because I have been into so many organizations where security was an afterthought, or security was baked in later because the developers and engineers were just so quick to hurry up and get the product to market or to get the system online. Well, then without the security piece, you're layering it on top or trying to put it in now, later on, then one, it's going to cost you more money. Two, it's going to seem like a big nuisance because now you have to change all of this code. You have to change or implement all of these different processes. Yeah, you do. But if you were to start it from the beginning, it will be normal. The processes would be normal. Your code would be written securely and you wouldn't have a problem. And we're, facing that today with the latest technologies where people just, organizations or companies are just throwing out these technologies. And I go and I analyze a lot of these technologies. I'm not going to say the names of the technologies, but I'm like, security's not baked into this from the beginning. It just isn't. And so I'm like, this is going to become a problem down the line. And people just jump on it, they use it. And I'm like, you're going to have a problem.
Cordell, most of the people listening to this podcast will not have the deep level of technical expertise that you and your team have. Talk to me a bit about working with non-technical people, what you like to see across the table from you. So if you and I were sitting across a board table talking about a project or a certification or some remediation work and so on, what advice do you have for non-technical people to be useful, to ask the right questions, and to be able to engage with your team in order to get the most out of an engagement?
So I always tell non-technical people to think about what they do personally in life. So how do you protect your bank accounts? How do you protect your passwords? So when you log into your bank, you have to have two-factor authentication, right? When you have to log into your email or anything like that, you have to have a user ID and a password, and most likely now two-factor authentication to do that. If you have to do that in your personal life, it's the same thing at work. So think about just those simple measures when you're thinking about things. When you go to the ATM, do you allow someone to shoulder surf you as you put in your PIN? No. So why would you do that at work and allow someone to shoulder surf you while you're putting in your password or while you're putting in your PIN code to log in? So I tell people to think about the real world and what they do in their everyday lives to protect their personal data and use those similar practices on their job.
And also, people get so intimidated with new technologies, don't they? And the questions, as far as I can see, kind of remain what they always should have been. So, if you're planning to use AI to make some decisions in relation to your customers, well, what data are you using to train your AI? Do you know where it came from? Is it any good? Is it representative? Does it represent, past performance does not always represent the future. How confident are you going to be? What are your checks? What are your alternative ways of doing things? What happens if you need to run something in parallel? Like, none of the questions I have just asked are technical in any way. They are common sense question. And I think sometimes, particularly with AI, a degree of common sense has gone out the window. And I think we need to get back in and re-empower people to ask the questions that they innately know themselves that they should be asking.
Exactly. Because I think the problem, it's not AIs that's the problem. It's the problem with people that use AI is that instead of them taking the time to actually put the detailed prompts in to get the information that they actually need, they just quickly throw something in there, or they quickly don't really think about it, don't have the common sense, or don't drum up the common sense because, everybody has common sense, just can't be lazy, to be honest. And so don't be lazy and actually put in the detailed prompts to get exactly like what you need. I was helping out a friend of a few days ago with the prompt for a project that they wanted. And so they were like asking, I want to do this. And so they were like, I put it into AI and I didn't really get anything. And I'm like, well, because you can't do that. You have to actually put in every single detail of what you're looking for. And you have to ask it like you're talking and explaining it to another person. If you are explaining in detail, then you're going to get the detail back. But if you explain in just an abbreviation, you're going to get back an abbreviation. If you don't and then also you have to train the AI. You can't just throw something in there and that's it. You train it. So you keep updating the prompts, you keep changing or adding more detail to actually get the output that you actually need. And then read through all of the output to make sure that there's no errors in the output because it's a machine and it's machine learning. So it's learning from you. So if you don't allow it to actually learn from you, it's just going to give you garbage.
In the same way as if you were instructing a person to do something, you wouldn't give them one sentence and leave them off and then take exactly what they came back as gospel and never do anything about it. Do you find that people are using AI just because they can when maybe sometimes they shouldn't? Are you like, is that part of what you do as well? So like sometimes do you just say to people like, why are you even doing that? Does that come up in your assessments?
Yeah, that does come up in my assessments because sometimes people, to send a simple email, they'll send an email written by AI. And I'm like, you did not have to do that. You actually just wasted time when you could have thought with your mind and just typed up what you wanted to say and then just send it. Like, it doesn't have to be this, now it sounds like a machine. It doesn't even sound real. It's like, that doesn't even make any sense. So I'm like, why are you trying to do everything inside AI? You don't have to do everything, because we still need to use our brains or use our minds and exercise our minds, because that's how we increase our intelligence, not just like dependent upon the machine. And I think that the dependence upon it is becoming a major issue, and we need to stop the dependence upon it and use it as a tool and not as something to just like be lazy.
So supplant everything. Well, I completely agree, because I won't mention which big four firm did this, but I was at a conference recently when one of the big four firms, their use case for using AI in a financial services context. And this was after, if you spend lots of money and many months and interrogate your client data, was effectively to go, dear first name, I hope all is well today in your town, address line 4 or that kind. Yeah. That's not AI, that's mail merge. And we've had that for 20 years. And no, you don't need to spend, and you don't need to, use your customer data in that way. You don't need to spend the time or the money doing that. That is not a good use of AI. So I think selection of use case is something that we're not maybe always being very clever about.
Exactly, because then the lack of creativity starts to show up. Everyone is a creative. We create, right? And so we have to use our creativity as well, especially when we're doing business, because without being creative when doing business and using your brain, then what is use of your job? Like then because people is like, oh, well, AI is going to replace us. No, it's not. It's going to replace you because you don't know how to use it properly, or you are not actually using your brain. And I always tell people, like, start using your brain, like talk, like actually like communicate and like have critical thinking as well. Because if you don't think critically, then you're not going to really get that far.
Finally, Cordell, for our listeners, well, maybe second to finally, I might ask you one more question after this, but for our listeners, can you give us a good book to read, a good framework to consult, a good starting point, or an action they can take to make themselves more knowledgeable in the whole space of cyber security, AI, and so on?
Sure. So a good book that they can read, there's the CGRC book. It's on Amazon, and it's like the basic principles of compliance. It is NIST based, but it is still a very good book to read through, because the first 2 chapters go really in depth about it, where people read it several times to really understand. But then I say, once you read it, take some notes, then go in and not do a AI search, but do a Google search to find some references, and then pull those references and read through those references, because it'll really help you understand compliance frameworks, because that's one of them. And then I would say, if you can find compliance frameworks online, read through, not the whole thing, but read through the first part explaining what it is and why it is, and then ask questions. So go into Google, ask the questions so that you actually learn the what, when, where, who, how, and why.
Okay, we'll include a couple of links maybe in the show notes to send people around those pieces as well. Cordell, it's been a really fascinating conversation, and I'm fascinated by your career and your vision and so on. Can I ask, what's next in the grand vision? Is there another string to your bow, another area you want to go in, or are you right where you want to be and just keep doing this? Do you have other things you haven't fulfilled yet?
Basically expansion all around. So I'm expanding globally, so more into Europe and then onto the African continent. And then after I get established there into Asia for cyber, I also have a foundation called Shaping Futures Foundation, where I have an orphanage in Arusha, Tanzania. And my goal is to continue that work and then expand and actually build a school. My bold dream was to at first build a school, but I know that you have to, with the foundation, you have to take little tiny steps that I had to learn the hard way, because it takes lots of money to do those things. But, expanding the foundation, because the foundation is not about just giving money to just give people money. It is actually a training ground. So the kids go to school 7 days a week. Monday through Friday is regular school, and the evenings is extracurricular training, which is like home ec, learning how to clean the house, learning how to do dishes, learning how to do things, fix little minor things around the house. And then On the weekend, they learn cyber, they learn electrical, they learn gardening to grow their own food. So those different life skills that they're learning, the money goes toward them actually learning, because I believe that you teach a man to fish and not just give him a fish. And so that's really important. So expanding upon that and just continue to become a strong global brand.
Well, I was going to finish by asking you your why, but I think you've just explained your why. That's interesting. We'll talk offline about some of the work I do and some of the organizations I work as well, including Child's Eye Foundation, who have a view on orphanages, which we should talk about, and a view on kids being in communities and families. But I get the goodness and the sentiment behind what you're looking to do. Cordell, you're a fascinating person and a fascinating organization. Brownstone Consulting will include some details on the notes. Thank you so much for joining the C-Suite Framework today. Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. For more information about the How to Be a books, the C-Suite Framework courses, the podcast, or to get in touch with me, head over to www.csuiteframework.com.